Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on virtual reality. I'm sorry about today's late. Actually, today I'm facing trouble with lot of traffic jam. Maybe we will discuss how we can solve these traffic issues in Asia Pacific. So first, I would like to give chance Mr. Jason for discussing on virtual reality.
Wow, where to start? Uh, it's the future. The first thing um, on the top of my head, I've been approaching. There's a Discord server called Transhumanists in VR, and they do meetups every Saturday in VR and stuff. And I started going to those, and that's looking pretty cool. I think we should probably try doing more of that every week. Uh, you know, Um, I don't really have tons to say, so I could pass the baton on for now and then build off what David says. He's always got everything awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Professor David Smith. Yeah.
Well, Sharif, thank you so very much for this. Virtual reality is part of a whole area of looking at the concepts of how we can combine the physical world and the digital world together in different ways. Virtual reality itself, though, is a simulated experience that it can be similar or completely different from the real world. And application of virtual reality include entertainment, particularly in the video games today. They're moving more and more towards a VR and a metaverse type of approach. They can be in education, which is doing the same thing. They can be in healthcare, medicine, in science, training. And we're now beginning to see them used more and more in business. Some of the very interesting applications in business are we're seeing virtual reality beginning to be used in business meetings. So think of this StreamYard broadcast we're in today. We'll now put it in a VR shell where we're all can be even in the same room together, even though we're spread around the world. And currently, most of the virtual reality is either with virtual reality headsets or with virtual reality rooms where you can begin to set them up and project them all using it. It's very fun in some of the headset use, some of the virtual reality applications I've used. You kind of lose track of where you are in the physical world. And many of the folks that have used it with me and myself, we end up with bumps and bruises on us as we run into furniture, walls, and other things as we get so wrapped up in the virtual reality. There's another part of reality, digital reality, which is called augmented reality. And in augmented reality, it's the combining of the virtual world and the physical world. We've talked before about how some of the uses of augmented reality is, for example, at the Gigafactory that was built not far from me, um, we were able to put the physical world of building the factory into the augmented world, the digital world, where that the people installing, for example, electrical outlets, outputs for air, water, and waste for equipment, were able to do it through their headsets. And they were able to do it much faster than you could have seen before. And you're seeing how those put together. And like Eric said in the comments, you have physical business and virtual businesses beginning to tie together in a multi-dimensional way to be able to do stuff. One of my favorite ways of thinking about virtual reality was going back to some of the early movies that had precursors of it, like Tron, or one of my other favorite ones, since it was made here in Austin, was Spy Kids 3D. And you begin to see how those can work and play with each other and interact with each other. And this whole VR design, the goal is for the users, the people interacting with it, to experience an alternative existence through whatever senses the designer can have access to. We see it through sight, we see it through hearing. We are now beginning to sense it through smell, through touch with the uh, gloves and other elements like that. But virtual reality really began back, in the late 30s and 40s with some of the physical types of tools we had back then. One of the first ones was something called a master viewer, which was the stereoscope screen that you would put up to your eyes and move the images back and forth to see them in stereo. But then they created that into simulators to use and began to use it in helmets. I would happen to have been involved with some of the first head-mounted displays and some of the first 3D coming off of high-resolution Unix workstations and saw the early days of this. And if you look at where we are today, from where that was back in the 70s and 80s, it has changed so very, very much. And so that's a very quick to get into it. But the big goal with where virtual reality is going today is with the high resolutions we have, 4K plus, and the ability to incorporate multiple sensors, it's going to become more of an immersive experience than it is an experience that we're just participating in. So that's my first thoughts on virtual reality.
You're on mute.
Mr. Markey.
How you doing? Definitely glad to have this conversation about virtual reality and augmented reality. I've actually been following some of the things that have been going on in that space. I don't claim to be an expert in it, but definitely it's been some interesting conversations where people are able to do some innovative things that using either the virtual or the augmented space. I've heard of people using it in both the medicine space as well as definitely in the gaming world and in a number of other places that are out there. And I know that even there's been some talk about how this could impact some things that we all love doing and all of that. So I just wondered some people's thoughts about this, because I had the pleasure this weekend of going out and seeing people enjoy the wonders of Mother Nature and all along those lines, because I was actually part of a outside festival that I was part of, and they were definitely out there canoeing and boating, and definitely some were even out there swimming. Well, actually, I guess they were kayaking maybe, but doing some of those kind of things that you can do on a river, and of course listening to music and listening to food and all of that. We're eating food and all in that space. But I guess the question I have for everybody, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts about this, is there any concern that we'll lose some of that human touch that we enjoy when we go to those events? I know when you get older, you can't necessarily go swimming, or you can't necessarily go and hear the music, and maybe virtual reality and augmented reality will be a chance to enjoy those experiences that I was enjoying while I was out and about mingling with the people, if for some chance or some health reasons you can't do that, and things of that nature. So I can see that benefit, but I can also see where some people may get so ingrained in it that they don't actually go out and smell the roses, as the old expression goes, and things of that nature. But I'd love to hear maybe your thoughts about that, David.
Mhm. Thank you. Dr. Eric, what you want to add? I saw you have a great comments on virtual reality. So, yeah.
Well, I don't think of I think of virtual more than virtual reality, because virtual reality is just part of the whole virtual sphere. And I don't think of it as something that you need 3D glasses on, because you can connect with your text, with email, with browsers, with chat, and with a full suite of virtual and augmented reality. So I think the real part of that is being able to connect with people in whatever way you have available. If you have great bandwidth, great. If you don't, you can still connect and create virtually and physically. So right now there are virtual businesses. In fact, I think more virtual clothing has been sold than real clothing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the clothing market for virtual, you design a suit that you can put on an avatar, I think you can sell more of them and make them less expensively than if you go to Nordstrom's. Then on the other hand, you have businesses that are very physical. And now you're starting to have businesses that create something physically and move them into the virtual space, including virtual reality. And now you have people starting to create virtual and move it into physical space. For example, you can buy into olive land, and that's where somebody's virtually first in cards sold off an olive ranch, and they do lavender and other things. You can buy by square foot. It's mostly automated, and you can watch it. So that's kind of a physical place gone to virtual, but there are things that you can create virtually and test. So to me, test it in virtual and do it physical. We're talking about actually building some communities in Mexico, and I'm trying to advocate, let's build them virtually. Let's have people live in them and move in them and invest in them virtually, because it is a great place to make mistakes and fail. It's a great place to make mistakes, learn quickly, and fail. And then the only other thing I'll say is virtual reality is used pretty heavily in training. The military has used it for years, and they've knocked hours and hours and hours off of what it takes for, and they've even done it with the whole glasses and all that, where you take things apart and you move it and you move around. But it's also good for doing things that you might not have done. Like one of the things that is most feared is public speaking. People have rated the fear of speaking above the fear of dying in some cases. But, you can start with a virtual, very small stage with nobody out there and start putting people in the audience. And so you can practice things like that virtually. So not only is it training for something that you could do, but maybe would be more efficient to do, but there are things that you can't do that you can rehearse and build up the ability to do. And that could include anything but talking to your boss of an uncomfortable situation. There's a lot of things we can do with virtual.
No, I definitely agree with that and everything. Hey, Dr. Sharif, you're on mute again. I do have good news for you, because I was actually just turned on my TV and Sasha just went off. So you are actually on the Roku right now. So it is actually airing on Roku right now, because I'm actually watching it on the Roku channel. So the show is actually going live on Roku.
Thank you. You know that World Talent Economy Forum, we collaborate with Pod TV. So yeah, we are promoting our content in through Pod TV in Roku and other place. So Dr. Eric, actually you bring very important point, especially all of our business going virtuals. Mr. Jason and all other speakers, I have a question, especially I do a lot of work with the grassroots level people, especially in Asia Pacific, especially with these developing nations. And I know that many of the small businessmen, many small organizations, still they do not engage with uh, this kind of virtual business. What is your advice? How quickly they can join this virtual business, and how they can adjust with this kind of technology, Mr. Jason?
Yeah, my advice would be do it right now. You can almost do it all for free, and it's pretty dumb not to, when you can have a store that has access to the entire planet. It's a no-brainer, really. I'd like to go back to what Eric was saying, though, about the virtual clothes. And yeah, there's whole business models set around where they build a whole game and give it away for free. You can come in there and play, and then they make money off you buying clothes for your character. There's a lot of money in that. There's going to be virtual real estate and all kinds of virtual stuff. And
yeah, I worked for a virtual company, and I recommended that we start doing pets.
Oh, virtual pets?
That's a whole market for pet accessories.
Yeah, there's a whole nother, and I think that actually exists and everything.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
but Jason, and definitely even Eric, I was going to add that I've actually been part of a business leadership conference that my friend Dr. Kelly does, and he actually had some virtual malls that have been involved, as well as some other people that were buying virtual land, kind of what you're talking about there in Mexico. They've been buying them off of like other islands and other things in that space. And the wearables can be quite interesting, because I know that even though we're several months away from it, since we're in the heat of summer, and I do literally mean the heat of summer here in North Carolina and all of that. But that being said, I remember when we did a New Year's Eve celebration with a friend of mine from London, and there were some people that did wearables, and some of those wearables, which is what those fashions are called, and everything, were quite unique, because there were some people that were doing very much contemporary fashions, like the Nordstrom brothers or Nordstrom kind of suits, and some of the things that you might expect if you were going into a regular business meeting. But there were also people that were dressing up like they were Roman generals, and people that were dressing up in things that we would never wear. Like, I think there might have even been somebody in a bicycle suit. Literally, the suit was made of a bicycle, because in the wearable space, you can become whatever you want to become.
Yeah, I noticed that wings
that we would not wear.
kind of popular.
Well, have you seen that? Have you seen that show where people perform as an avatar?
Right.
Have you seen that? They
I've
come
not
out,
seen it
they're
yet.
backstage, and the only thing
Yeah.
the audience sees is an avatar. And what's
Yeah.
interesting about that is they can be somebody who they want to be, but the
Mhm.
ones that really interested me were the ones that added features, the ability to float, or the ability to send signals out and do things that you couldn't even do as a performer.
Yeah, I've been really interested in virtual performances, like do a concert in virtual reality. That's on my list.
Well, I remember
Eric,
the CEO of the company that I worked for years ago, this is over a decade ago, actually appeared virtually as a speaker, as a hologram
Mhm.
in Dubai.
Mhm.
So there he was in Dubai, and he was in California, the US, and he appeared as a hologram, a big one. And that was over a decade ago.
All right, Eric, I love what you're saying there, because that is what takes augmented reality, virtual reality to a new type of reality, which is called X reality or extreme reality. And that's where you can begin to take more than just the elements, but things like holographic projection and others are what this whole new X reality is about as well. So it's really beginning to take these concepts we're talking about and moving it into places where we can take advantage of the very wide bandwidth we have now in most places of the world, and how we can take most devices and plug them in together and have that work. So you see things where the Internet of Things type devices are being combined with virtual reality and augmented reality and X reality to help mesh the line between what is real, what is not real, what is digital, and how we get our senses involved with it. So that is, to me, where a lot of this direction is headed.
Hey, David,
And a lot of, if you look at the big thing, the devices, so if you look at what virtual reality glasses are looking like and where they're going, the idea is it's just like they're just part of your glasses.
Yeah.
For those of us
Are
that
your
wear
contact
glasses,
lenses.
you just
I
wear
have
glasses.
I have seen virtual reality contract lenses that work really neat, and you don't even have to wear a glass, and you can see just fine, but then it's very fine lines that your eyes adjust to when they're turned in one phase, but when they're in another phase, they actually become the virtual environment. And
And then,
that see where Elon Musk is going with his neural implant company.
So, well, that's what I was going to ask about, David, because I've heard about this whole concept of virtual implants, or as well. So they literally, I guess,
Well,
you can have
and those virtual implants have been around, Mark, for almost 20 years in one form or fashion of early experimenting. So if you
but
go
just
back,
imagine holographic projectors when those start become available, and you go to your restaurant or your you go have tea, you can just go out and you do stuff, you go to the mall. And so when you reach that point where people understand it and things become standardized and the equipment becomes reasonable in terms of cost and availability, then all of a sudden you'll start seeing this really high boost that's doing
oh,
exactly
Mark,
what David's talking about.
Yeah, Eric, I agree with you. I've been involved in a project last year through the holding company I'm part of, where we are putting in place holographic performance spaces in theme hotels, so that you could have a hologram of Michael Jackson perform at the same time in 5 or 6 different hotels, for example. Or, even to take it to the next level, we could go ahead and have holograms of Sharif take place on every continent on the earth. So this could be spread even better in this virtual environment.
Well, when we
And
had
I
the AI from
think we
yesterday's
created the
discussion,
hologram,
yeah, when we had the AI from yesterday's discussion, then Sharif
right?
can license himself to be a hologram appearing all over the world.
Hey, David and Eric, and if Jason wants to jump in, I'd be curious to hear their thoughts about it as well. One of the things that I've heard people have concerns about, and I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with them, but way back in the Ice Ages, we used to have this thing called the Ice Ages when the Walkman came out. And when the Walkman came out, everybody was wearing their Walkman and listening to their own personal taste of music and everything of that nature. And I had a friend of mine that follows a political discipline that I don't necessarily agree with, or I don't agree with all the principles of it, which is socialism. And he used to call that bourgeois subjectivity, because he felt that we were all just kind of like in our own world and ignoring the rest of the world. And I'm wondering, is there any fear that that could be happening with virtual reality as well? Because I know when I saw my nephews a couple of months back, even though we live in the same city and everything, they were, one of them, the oldest one, was totally wearing his Oculus glasses, and me and my mom, his grandma, could have, yelled boo, and he wouldn't have paid any attention because he was in his own space, in his own world.
There's going to be virtual worlds overlaid over the real world. So I think in some of them, they will be actually make us more immersed in the real world. Because like when you go to the virtual mall or whatever, you'll see real people walking around. Their images will be transferred into the VR in real time.
Okay.
But there'll be like ghosts walking around that you don't really know are there, but they're walking around in VR.
Well, if you go back to basics and just go back to people seek certain things. And one things we seek is play. Mm-hmm. First, we play. And when we start playing, then we want to share. And then we share, we get something going, and we thrive. And that's where companies and new things come. So the idea of encouraging play is a good thing. The problem is when we get something new, we don't have to know how to handle it, and it gets way out and abused, and we go off to the limits. And that starts when, all of a sudden they had this thing called the postal system. You could actually get letters out. What's the first thing that happened? All of a sudden we start mail abuse. Half our laws in terms of that were because of mail frauds. Our laws today that are trying to control are based on mail fraud because we didn't know how to handle mail. It was new, but it was really just a form of connection. And it didn't mean that then the telephone came into business, and all of a sudden the telephone goes out and we don't know how to use that. And by the way, the word hello was invented for the telephone. Before the telephone, nobody said hello. It was a word invented because what do we do? So, but we didn't know how to use the telephone, and it got way out of hand. And then all of a sudden we had email, and email went way out. The big thing right now is the social media. The challenge with it is when you do this persuasive technology that can actually take advantage of people's natural responses. And when you get somebody to start limiting information. So a virtual world is wonderful as long as everybody knows it's virtual. The problem is when we're living in a virtual world and we think it's real. And that's already happened right now. For example, in the Soviet Union, everybody knew under the Cold War days that the government lied. They knew it was a lie. Everybody said, oh, everything's great. And everybody knew they were lying. But the whole point is people began to believe this world, even knowing it. So you can even listen to a world knowing it's a lie. And you say, well, I'm smart enough to know the difference. But we get caught up in these false worlds. So to me, that's the biggest concern is keeping the world real.
Have you ever heard the rubber hand experiment or the doll experiment? where they hooked up somebody. The doll experiment is really good. Where a person could only see down, and then there was a doll there instead of their body, and then they would touch their toe at the same time they're touching the doll toe, and after about 5 minutes or so, the brain would start to think that that doll is really, and then they take a hammer and smash the doll, and they freak them out. So our brains have this really, really unique ability to be able to picture ourselves as being there. I really don't think that we're going to end up feeling like we're a head in a jar, kind of.
So you say that, and it actually comes back to something that Sharif had brought up earlier and everything, which is this whole concept of the doll experiment. Because the doll experiment I know about is actually about race relations and things of that nature. And it was this whole concept of beauty and what makes beauty, because the industry, and even in this virtual world, a lot of times the powers that be are the ones that dictate the perception, whether that's Hollywood or that media industry. And there was a doll experiment that existed in the African American community where they would ask somebody, who is the pretty doll, and it might be a doll that looked more like the person if they were African American or brown or something along those lines, meaning Asian or Indian or whatever. And then there would be a blonde doll. And because of the media presence, the blonde doll is who the majority of the people picked and everything. And that's the doll experiment that I'm aware of.
I know that, and I see the logic behind that, but as me that is a big fan of buxom blondes, I it sort of makes sense to me. I'm just saying. But go ahead. I didn't.
No, like I said, some people like those buxom blondes, and I can understand that and everything. And that even comes back to virtual reality and augmented reality. Because one of the things that I'm wondering about, and I'd love to hear both everybody, including Sharif, is sometimes virtual reality can be a wonderful thing. I'm still, like I said, Friday I hit the big 6-0, but I'm still in that single space, even as an old man in the single space, or as I like to call it, middle life in that single space. But I can tell you that there are probably some people that are more comfortable, partially because of COVID and partially because of augmented reality, being in those fake relationships versus the real relationship. I can tell you that I would much rather have a real relationship, but there are some people that are much more comfortable with the augmented version. And there's some people that are even, like to Eric's point, totally wrapped up in their relationships, and they only are having fake relationships. So I'd love to hear folks' thoughts about that aspect of augmented as well.
Well, again, I think people want to reach out and experience things, and I think virtual reality creates a environment for people to connect, and it is a good stepping stone for, if you're terrified of leaving your house and you have that, the virtual reality is a good place. But like you said, it really should be that stepping stone which allows you to go somewhere. I mean, there's a lot of places I can think of that might be virtually nice to travel to. But on the other hand, I'd like to pick the best of those and go there myself. So to me, and by the way, a term for that, to me, just as long as people know they're not getting sucked into a persuasive technology, which keeps you, living. That's the thing, because you make money. Let's say we all decide together to create a virtual world, and we want to make money. And we want to keep people in that virtual world as possible, because the longer they're in there, the more they buy from us, the more than that. And so we use these persuasive technology to keep people in there. That's not good if we're taking advantage of those things that we like to get us in there for something that may not be best at us.
Algorithms. We were talking about social media yesterday or whatever, or whenever it was. Yeah. We want to make it to where we're helping them and not taking advantage.
Or just think of it out. So this is not virtual reality. This is people stuff. Just imagining smoking. Just how imagine the pressure was on in this world where smoking was good and everybody should smoke, and let's pay people to smoke, and that's not good for us.
Wow. See, I didn't even think about that aspect.
It's not good for us. It's good for us this stuff generally works when people, if you read like the wisdom of the crowds works when you have independent people looking at things independently and coming together, this decentralized idea. When the centralized idea, when something becomes predictable, and then people go, oh, I can exploit that prediction, and I can spend millions of dollars in marketing money. Being a marketing person itself, I can look at the history and know that we've spent millions of dollars, billions of dollars, getting people to do things that aren't in their best interest.
Yeah,
And
that's real
this
true.
virtual reality just provides another vehicle where that is possible, not not uh, not doesn't have to be that way, but
And it
it's
also
just
gives people the opportunity to pull things that they can't necessarily pull in real life. Like I'm thinking Jason. Jason seems like a very nice looking gentleman and everything. So I'm thinking that he would have no problem pulling a Hollywood starlet that was blonde and all of that. Whereas the Johnny nerd that is not looking like Jason might have a harder time. So I'm thinking Jason would have no problem, but the Johnny nerd might want to get the augmented reality version because he can't do it.
well, I'd like us all to go flying today. That would be great.
That would be great.
I could just take off from my backyard, meet you guys somewhere. We could fly around. That would be awesome. But on the other hand, I've flown a glider and that's pretty fun too. And I don't know that I was saying, gee, I wish this was virtual. That was pretty good too. But on the other hand, I can't always afford to go there. It's pretty expensive, and I can't do that from my backyard. But
Oh, no. Oh,
I
virtual. Yes.
I probably still would buy one of those Jetson ones if you've seen one as they get better and better. I probably still would want to have one, even if I could virtually fly.
There's one other thing I want to mention real quick about the benefits of VR. There's the Machu Picchu. It's this old city in the Andes, built by the Inca. And, I've seen documentaries about it a number of different times, and how they talk about there's this older construction on the bottom, and then there's this newer construction on top. And they talk about that they think maybe this older construction was from this other thing. And then they try to show it, and I got it. But when I went there in VR and really looked at the stones and was able to look around, it's a whole different experience, and it really brings it home in a whole nother level. So I think in education, it's going to be huge.
Yeah, I'd also like to put out that VR is not the best way to experience everything.
Right.
Sometimes it's distracting. For example, I know the government uses VR for familiarization. Before you go to this place, let's really understand where are the hills, where's the ocean bottom and currents, where's the wind, where's the vegetation. Let's really understand that. But when it comes to saying, now let's drive through this at great speed or operate that, 3D is not, virtual reality is not necessarily the best tool at that point. Augmented reality becomes a lot better. Things like heads-up displays, they're using, it comes a lot better. So I see the ability to be able to blend from multiple interactions depending on where you are in what's going on. When you're you want to look at the full background, 3D is really good, virtual reality is really good. But sometimes, when you bring it down to certain aspects, certain phases, sometimes a text message would be better. I'm doing this. Text me when I need to know this. That's a better way to interact with what's ever going on, depending on what phase it is and where that is. So I see it as a continuum, not, hey, let's go to VR or not.
Hey, Eric, and if Jason wants to jump in, I see he went on mute there for a second. Do you think that virtual reality or even augmented reality will ever interfere with things that we have actually enjoyed doing for a long time? I'm actually thinking about the sports world. I'm actually a fan of both the NBA, which just completed their season, and became a fan because we now have a hockey team, or have had now one for a couple of decades here in the Carolinas, but became a fan to some degree of hockey, and definitely a fan of football and lesser extent baseball, but he definitely will follow my Brewers and everything. But I'm wondering, is there any thought that at some point, because I know in the science fiction novels, you would sometimes find that there wasn't people actually playing the game anymore. It was the avatars playing the game and all along those lines. So do you feel that that is something that is strictly science fiction, or do you feel that in, say, another 50, 30 years, we won't have to worry about LeBron James and his contract?
Just look at esports. Esports is bigger than almost anything. It's huge. Mm-hmm. You've ever been to esports or seen one of those esports stadiums, or trucks come and set up, in a few hours, and you've got a whole performance area, that kind of thing. there's esports. So who gets some of the credit? Game designers, first of all.
Mhm.
When somebody creates a game, there is wonderful things. Those are people interacting to create that environment. Then you have people playing the environment, and wow, now they're making money and getting all praise to be able to take an environment that somebody else built. And then you know what? Now there's the commenters on the players. Oh, there's
Mhm.
announcers who have their own little niche on commenting. I've even seen groups that commented on how well the announcers are doing,
Yeah.
talking about the players and the game. So now we have people saying, "Well, what do you think of that game Jason designed? Oh, is that better than Sharif's? And how about Mark playing that game? And how's that? How do you think that Sharif is doing commenting on that? Do you think he's a
Mhm.
good? Do you think they should go a different way?" So. It's all interaction that's fun. And yet, as big as esports is, I haven't heard of anybody talking about shutting down professional sports,
Right.
because at some point, people like that physical part of playing. If you don't believe that, go watch volleyball on Manhattan Beach in LA.
Mhm.
Those people
Mhm.
are intense about getting
Yeah.
there and hitting that ball.
That's another thing that I actually kind of worry about, because if you think about it, our bodies are really kind of designed to be moving. We're kind of
Mhm.
designed, just regular upkeep usually kind of entails doing stuff, moving if you don't move your arm around, after a while it's going to get not good. And so I wonder if we're not going to take to VR so well because of that.
We could, but I think there is I think there's a desire to move in space in some ways, and there's nothing that says you can't combine them. I mean, I know lots of people without playing those games where they mix location with games, and people could put things and plant things, anything from Pokemon Go to, all that. So there's nothing that says you can't make it more interesting for people to experience the world. A friend of mine created a company called Rock My Run, and all that does is manage your playlist to achieve your goals. Its job is to get you out of there, so it picks the right kind of music, it adjusts the tempo. It's kind of doing that to get you to go. So if there's a desire to do that, and people design that, like a lot of people don't like exercising. I think we all like getting up and moving, but a lot of people don't like that feeling of, oh, I don't want to sweat, I don't want to do this. But what if we could convince you to do that? What are some persuasive and other technologies? First of all, what if we all have meters, as we're talking right now, telling how many steps we've walked today? Then the whole time we're talking, I'm saying, Jason's ahead of me on 100 steps. I'm
Mhm.
going to go out and take care of that.
Well, I think some longevity technology would really help with that, because what would convince me to get out again was, would be 20 again. I would for sure be out there if I was 20 again.
Yeah, being 20, and like I said, or maybe going for a longer life. I've jokingly said that I'm going to shoot for 200, so I've only got another 140 to go, and all of that, and that's what I'm going to go for, and all in that space. But of course, I wanted to be a healthy 200. I don't want to be sitting there looking like a skeleton. As a friend of mine said, I could always put myself in a refrigerator.
20. I don't even think about really how long I want to be 20.
So like I said, you
So-
could go back to 20 and then be 20 for 50 years.
So for me, this isn't so much of a technology, because we've done the same thing with TV. Oh, you're going to watch TV. You're never going to get out. Yet gyms and rock climbing gyms and things are still up there. So it's not like this is new territory for us.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We've been this here before, so the potential of the abuse is high, especially when it's new and we don't understand it. Like my oldest son, he went in the video game world and we couldn't get him to stop. I mean, his high school days. Now he's like, why would I want to watch a video game? I can't believe I did that. So when it was new to him, that's his whole world, and all his friends were in the video game, and now he's international guy doing stuff, and music and playing music is more important to him than a video game. So we all get over this. The big problem is the same problem we have with our politics and our interaction with business markets. It's when we've got this moral hazard where it's with my best interest to convince you to do something that's not in your best interest. And that goes overall. And the big thing is, okay, who governs this stuff? If I create a new game, a new technology, new persuasive environment, who rules that? Is this capitalist or is this socialist? Like Mark hates that word, or is it, what is that? And by the way, I don't even think of things in terms of capitalist, social. I just think of, how do you measure success? If it's dollars, it turns out dollars are really good at measuring some things and really bad at measuring other things. Because if I look at the dollars, it might be more advantageous for one or more of us to be slaves. That sounds like it, makes dollars, but so dollars is a really bad metric for some things. It's a really fantastic metric for others. And a socialist would say, well, you measure it in social good. So it's those metrics that aren't bad. It's how you take that, because you can take this measuring for social good and turn that into Stalinism if you want to. And that, well, no, we know that we don't want to go there again. So, it's how do you measure that, and how do you, so there's a big play talking about governance and how do you govern the metaverse on those kind of things. And we've learned this with the block. So you come up with Bitcoin, and all of a sudden people go, how are we going to get together as a community to make this a great thing for all of us? So immediately we start saying, well, how do I get my vote worth more than all your votes? Well, I'll form a party, we'll do proxy, I'll do ads, and all of a sudden somebody takes control of the block. Well, the nice thing about a block is somebody either starts their own or they forks it and say, well, I'm going to stake where I'm going a different direction, and let's make sure what happened the first time never happened again. Okay, great. Well, then what happens? Well, somebody figures out a new way. They get control. So it either they go do a new thing, or it forks, takes the same code and goes down another path. And so we've learned lots of lessons learned on how is it to get. In fact, there's an interesting book by Dan Larimar called More Equal Animals that you can download at moreequalanimals.com. And there's even an audiobook there you can listen to. But what they've been saying is, how are we going to govern this reality, this virtual reality? If we create these planets, if we create this environment, who's going to be in control of this to make sure somebody doesn't take it and create a pervasive environment which causes people to act against their own good? So for me, the virtual reality thing is governance. And so, how do you govern these environments? If we do it right, we create environments for people to play with common interests or common values, whatever. They come together and you play, you go, this is pretty good. And so now it's easy. We start creating things and we start sharing, and then we start publishing, and this becomes this big world that people jump on. Well, how do you make sure that virtual reality world doesn't get bought or co-opted by somebody else who says, it's in my best interest as the owner of that to keep you guys locked in here doing things where I make most of the profit or you act against your own good.
But speaking of that and everything, I know that here in the West, we've been having, particularly in the United States, a lot of shooter incidences and things of that nature that have been serious tragedies. And my good friend Jacoby, who's actually in the gaming industry and everything, is not one that will allow the video game industry to take the blame. But I do know that there are folks that are frustrated on the opposite side by what they call real-time shooter games. So I was just wondering people's thoughts about that, because that's one of the cases where we might have to figure out ways to regulate, because we definitely want people to have fun.
So my first question is always this: what's the link?
Right.
I mean, we start with this idea that shooter links are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we can watch it on TV.
Right, exactly.
In the old days, we used to celebrate by taking people to executions. Hey, bring the family, kids, come on, got an execution. Let's watch that.
No, it
So
wasn't just executions. It was also race riots. That's where the term picnic came from and everything. It actually has a very negatory thing because it was
I used to
actually
watch
watching a
battles in the
lynching.
Civil War too. Let's go watch
Yeah.
people kill each other live. We'll sit up there and watch them have a picnic while we watch people actually kill each other. That'd be great. So, the big question, if it is about violence, is that first, where does violence really come from, as opposed to somebody stands up and says, "Oh, we need to kill those games." And I don't know, so I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying the first effort. When you start writing doctoral stuff, they don't let you get away with anything. So as soon as you make a statement, somebody's going to beat you up and say, well, wait a minute, you just said there's a link between video games, and is there? If so, what is the link? And there might be a big
Yeah,
link. I don't know.
I don't think the evidence has really supported it so far. I think.
No, I
But
agree with you.
if that's true, are you saying that the countries which have more violence are those that have more video games? So low
Yes.
country violence don't have violent games. Is that what you're saying? I don't know.
And like I said, I was just actually basing on the conversation I've had with my friend Jacoby, and he's definitely very much pro video games because, like I said, he comes from the video game space, but he has definitely heard from others that argue that argument, including whenever there's a mass shooting. Because some cases, the people will say that that is where they did some of their training is by playing these video games and getting involved in these video games. So I'm not
But it,
necessarily
but
saying
it, it
I
may be
agree.
or maybe, but you just brought the problem back to what we were just talking about is
Right,
governance. Now you're talking
right,
about the governance of our real world. We went from the
right.
governance of virtual. Same thing for the governance of real world. So I'm a politician, so I want to get lots of money for my campaign. So I'm going to say, you know what it is? It's those Pod TV guys. They are terrible. We need to create that villain, and you need to give money to my campaign so we can absolutely stop those pod guys because they are horrible. And so, you need to create this virtual world so that I can get people angry to fund my campaign so that I can go on and then I've already, it just makes sense to find somebody to blame and say, pay me money. And then we'll just, let's not solve problems anymore. Let's just promote my campaign. So,
No, I agree with you on
and
that.
by
And
the
I
way,
do love the idea. I was saying I do love the idea
that
of virtual reality being used both as an educational tool and to go places that you can't go. Because like I said, I've not done
love
enough world traveling, but I do like kind of what Jason was talking about. Like I would love to be able to go to Peru, and I do know about that village that you were talking about, Machu Picchu, and everything. So I do know about that place, but I would love to be able to go there on a virtual tour, or even go to Belize or Brazil or Kenya or a number of other places that are on my wish list, but my real dollars are not allowing them to happen right now. Whereas in the virtual world, I could actually go visit those places. And hopefully when the real dollars match the virtual dollars, then I can actually go and have an idea of what I am visiting. Because I know one of the things that when I've gone to places and I went on a cruise, I think 3 years ago, is I hate going on the what I would call like the tourism spots. I'd rather go off into the beaten path and see how the real city and the real community is, and not just go to the tourist spots. Like if I was going to Paris, I might stop by the Eiffel Tower, but I'd also like to go into some of the country towns of France and see what their lifestyle is all about.
Well, I spent a lot of time in emergency management. And, one of the things we used to do is get all these layers of information and present it and show people. And if we weren't involved in it, a lot of times I'd be at a trade show, people coming by, they'd want to see, what's going on with, that flood in Japan or, the tornadoes in this area, or, this earthquake in Haiti. And it was just amazing how people's reactions were different when you could actually see what was going on and really start to wait a minute, what is that boat? What are those boats doing 5 miles?
Yeah.
And that's, you even if you went there, you'd have trouble seeing all that's going on because it's so crazy. So I'm sure the people on the ground were having some different experiences that were pretty valuable, but just the ability to put that all together and say, whoa, here's what's going on. Or, the firefighters would get up in the morning. And once we started putting UAVs at night that could go record things, usually in the morning, it's like, well, where are we today? Let's spend the first half, hours of the day trying to figure out where it is. They would come in and they would have, it's moved here and this has happened and that, while that wasn't with glasses and everything, Oh, by the way, we could project this stuff on anything. We would make sand tables and automatically, so we
Oh
could
yeah, I've seen
project
that.
this stuff.
Yeah.
We could do things like project in the corner of a room and account for the corner, so it looked like flat screen TV.
Hey, Eric, maybe Sharif may have some thoughts about this too. The first time I saw, it might have been virtual reality, it might have been augmented, but one of the times I saw it that really captured my attention and really made me think about it is I consider myself to be somewhat of an empath, so meaning sympathetic to people that are going through their troubles. You're talking about hurricanes and things of that nature. And I remember that I saw a display, this might have been 5 or 6 years ago at a music festival. And it was somebody that was giving you an idea of what a woman goes through when she is being stalked or attacked and things of that nature. But it was probably one of the most moving things that I've ever saw. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about how augmented reality and virtual reality can be used to actually help us get empathy and sympathy for people that are going through hard times. I'm imagining you've done some of that work, Eric, and everything, but I just know that really captured me when I got to literally walk in the footsteps of somebody and not actually have to physically be there.
Yeah, I think virtual reality is really great at that.
Yeah.
Imagining you show up at the work, whoever you are, and you're told, "Oh yeah, we're going to pay you less here."
Right.
Here, sign up. Here's your NUC listed, right? I mean, just it's like, hey, wait a minute. Here's a job you can't have. Here's a job you can have. No, I'm going to give this person because I know them. So, yeah, that'd be really good.
Yeah. Definitely. Jason, are you having a party over there and you didn't invite us?
So, I do have a pretty good answer for what Eric was talking about earlier about governance.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to another thing he mentioned about the wisdom of crowds. I'm very interested in collective intelligence and in e-governance. That's why I'm the legislative director for the USTP. That's part of why I volunteered for AGI Lab, which one of their main goals is going to be e-governance. But I think that I'm working on putting together a VR world where the education is what gives you the different game powers in the game. So the way, like in the real world where Eric was mentioning, the politician would raise money and then do all this other stuff to try to game the system, or, to get more power to their vote. The way you would do it inside this system is through education. So, it's sort of like a technocracy kind of. And I think through those mechanisms that it weeds out a lot. And also it puts the decision making into the hands of those who actually know what they're talking about. They know the material. Just to get to the decision.
But the key is, if you're going to involve a lot of people in something, most people are not going to know what they're talking about. So your system should take into account that it's going to come in with people who don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's got to start from the ground up.
But the biggest danger is when people form a party and just say, I'm going to assume that my party leader knows what they're talking about, and I'm going to follow whatever they tell me to do. If they tell me vote for this, I'm voting for this. That's one way you increase your power, is by forming a party.
Wait a minute, Eric, isn't that what we do now? Because we got these things called PACs, and I can tell you that oftentimes they'll give you like a list, and half the time the people that are voting that way couldn't tell you anything about the issues. They just know that whoever told them to vote that way,
and when we do gaming simulations where you get all over one vote kind of thing, it always goes to two parties, because all of us are voting, and then I say, well, I want more power, so let's see if I can get Sharif and we'll go together. Now we're beating Jason and Mark, and then Jason and Mark go, I don't like that, so they form a party. So we go out and get some more people to form our party. Now we're voting again, and then it comes into two parties. And I have a very strong challenge believing that two parties can represent over 330 million opinions or 300 million opinions. I have trouble thinking we can accurately capture that in two parties.
Exactly. The duopoly is a huge problem, and it creates so much. That's part of the reason why I'm in the USTP too, because it doesn't matter if you can't win the fight. Sometimes you still have to fight it, and at least have a voice in that space. And
well, don't you feel like if you don't vote for one of the parties, you're throwing your vote away because the parties have lined up to say, well, we're all going to vote along these ways. So if in our virtual reality we create these worlds and we do that, guess what's going to happen? We've already known. If you structure it that way, you end up with two parties, or if one party can do it, they'll take over.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, one of the complaints that I've heard people say about virtual reality, and I think Sharif was actually alluding to it earlier when you talk about the other countries and everything, is that most augmented reality and most virtual reality takes up a sizable portion, like in the gigabytes, if not terabytes, of your computer and all of that. So definitely, if you've got those kind of equipment and you can afford that kind of equipment. So I guess the question that a lot of people are asking, particularly those in third and second world countries, is how affordable is virtual reality, and is it affordable enough? Because I know that there was a time that definitely the TV wasn't all that, was more expensive than it is. But are we at a point now where somebody, say in Malaysia or somebody in these other places, can actually afford the virtual reality that we are talking about?
How virtual? If you're talking Ready Player One level, then yeah, no. But you can do a lot with a browser. Mm-hmm. So now you still have problems with bandwidth in many places. Right. But
that I think is going to be a huge problem with VR is how much money.
But just remember, one of the largest distributed metaversal games on the planet has no 3D.
None at all?
None. Zero 3D.
Okay, which one you mean?
What's that?
Which one you mean?
Alien World.
What was it?
Alien Worlds.
Alien World.
So that's one of the play-to-earn games where people go and they play, and you actually get to earn Trillium, which can be converted to whatever currency.
I loved it.
But the whole point of that is the ability is to create planets and eventually turn the planets over to the players. Now that's a crazy idea. You make your own decisions, and then the idea is if somebody creates something. So if Jason creates a world, why can't I go create my store or my things on top of his worlds? And why can't Mark you go in and put something in my store, and Sharif can, there's that idea is the potential is whether it's 2D, 3D, virtual reality, augmented reality, the potential is to integrate all these things on there. So when you talk about can you get the benefits of these things, well, you get it to the benefit at the level the people can have, and that's where technology is going. That I can play Alien Worlds on this device,
on the phone. No doubt.
The phone as long as a browser.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's getting cheaper. I mean, it is getting cheaper.
Yeah, but is it cheap enough? Because like I said, I've heard people, including some friends of mine, that have talked about buying these virtual islands and these virtual properties. And like I said, I have thought about dabbling in it, including the metaverse and everything, but I don't know that it's affordable for everybody. So I was just wondering if y'all.
So in this case, you're going in, you're playing. So you're playing, and maybe you're making $5 a day, which in some people wouldn't be a lot. It's a lot in others. Maybe you're making $30 a day. And so now you're using that money, and then you go in and you finally buy some land, and now you become a landowner, and then people are mining on your land and you're getting a piece of the mining cut. So, what we've seen is countries like the Philippines and other places like that actually creating things and starting businesses and being in that. So what's so attractive to these is the entry point is very low. But why does that work? It's because that particular thing is not requiring everybody to go out and start by buying an expensive headset. Now, might you want to have one and get into that? Well, sure, but that wasn't your question. Is can everybody play? Your question, can people play at that level? You're saying, is it too expensive to play? Well, what we're saying is it might even pay the money to play at some level that's able to use low technology. When you start getting up to high technology, that's going to be a while.
Yeah, and that's
but
what I was
there's
thinking
nothing
about.
that says that a virtual clothes designer can't eventually start with something, build up a business, and then start their virtual hat shop in wherever.
And I guess that's what I was asking, because even in some of the programs, like I think on this computer, I've got one of those augmented reality kind of browser type sets and everything. And I know some people are into voxels and other things, but even some of those are not as cheap as I would like them to be. But like I said, I definitely have downloaded them. And I also know that sometimes they take up a lot of energy from the computer as well. So sometimes depending on what else you got to do on the computer,
to me,
is
the most popular computer in the world is this puppy here. And I'm amazed, as expensive as these are, how much the cost has gone down in many ways, and how many people have them all over the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The whole VR is very computer intensive, though. Even the creation of it. I know I was getting into making like Blender and different 3D modeling things, and was trying to put together scenes, and my computer just couldn't handle. I mean, it can make a model that takes like an hour or something, but it would take days to render a whole scene, and there's just no way. And so that is
but again, at some level, people can play. At other levels, less people can play. At some levels, almost nobody can play.
Right.
But we used to be designing, real interactive things within. We were doing with the San Diego Supercomputing Center. That was great. That was a supercomputing that we were feeding a Doom engine with real-time updates of basically.
And I was just double checking.
You were involved with a project putting Doom into a supercomputer? Is that what you said?
Yes. Yeah, and the idea was, could you have a bunch of people building map entries, and could you make it so whenever you were in the game, you could look at an actually up-to-date map that treated it as a virtual space that reflected what was changing. So when you looked at the map, could you do that within there? And that at the time was running on a supercomputer. Today that doesn't need a supercomputer to run on that stuff. That's my point. Is it moves down, but there's going to be a long time for people to get. But the biggest thing is we're starting to put technologies into smaller, more available packages, and they're beginning to go out. My hope is that eventually, at least that level will be, much more widely distributed. But even if we do this, it's like, okay, well, do you think people can get the advantage of that quantum computer with the neural network and the, all integrated? And it's like, well, no, that's quantum computers. You got to be crazy. But
yeah, that's what I was asking, because I was actually just looking at my own computer, and I know that the one that I downloaded, and I do know that it takes up a lot of space whenever I try to play with it. And I'm kind of like the other gentleman was talking about what he was doing, but I downloaded Outspace VR, and I do know that the few times
I need a new computer. You guys are bringing it home that I need a new computer. It looks like a step in here. My computer's old. It's old.
I think we should pass it back to him. He raises his hand.
My last questions to you, and I want to go for the concluding remarks for today's session. Today's session was really great because a lot of interesting things actually we get from today's sessions. How actually this VR and AR industry creating more job opportunities for youth. This is maybe one of the good things we can discuss in our concluding remarks, Mr. Jason.
Job opportunities. Well, there's to code. There's, think about it like a land boom. Okay, like say in the U.S. history when they unlocked Oklahoma to be able to you could just go there and you could claim some land. Well, the whole internet and the virtual world is in a land boom right now. You could go and build a website for free and have your own virtual space. It's just so getting into it now, it would be an awesome idea because it's going to be around forever. So I would start learning how to get online and build some stuff. That's what and you can do a lot with a cell phone. I don't like to, but you can. That's it.
Mr. Martley.
Not just coding, but actually, Jason had alluded to it earlier, and I've seen it with friends and acquaintances of mine, including some of the young people that I associate with. But there are people that are making entire businesses in the things in the virtual reality and the augmented reality spaces. There are people that are making their own clotheslines doing the things in that space. There are people that are making their own malls. I mentioned that earlier. I know a young lady out of, I believe she's out of Chicago. There's another person, I think, out of Florida, if I'm remembering correctly, and all of that are looking at their own virtual malls and creating their own virtual malls. And there are people that are looking in villages and towns and cities, and in some cases, they are creating businesses in those spaces as well. So there are businesses that are existing. And of course, we do know that there are a number of people that are learning a lot more about social media, augmented reality, and virtual reality than I know. And I would argue probably all four of us here together combined, and they are what we call influencers. And there are a whole lot of people that are making a ton of money doing that, being influencers in this whole media internet space. So that's what I would say are just a few opportunities that I am aware of and all of that. And I do know that in a couple of weeks, my friend that I alluded to earlier, Dr. Kelly, will be having his Black Business Expo, and he will be teaching some of the youth about that. So that's part of what he is doing, is he is raising money to get some of these kids computers so that they can learn and everything along those lines. And hopefully they'll get some of these high-tech computers that are much better than mine and Eric's and all of that, so that they can learn some of these skill sets and learn them on top computers, and definitely learn even more than I know in this space. And of course, trying to get them to go to college as well, or any of the coding schools as well, because some of the coding is taking place in college, but there are places you can learn coding that are even in the community college level, and even not in the college or community level. They're just in some of our other educational institutions as well. So I would agree with something that Jason said. Coding is vital, and we all need to learn more and more of the coding. I wish I had learned that some 10, 15, 20 years ago. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Dr.
So,
Eric.
to me, the first thing is don't just think VR, think of the metaverse, and don't just think coding, because there is financing the metaverse, there's teaching the metaverse, there's payment processing in the metaverse, a whole new things. There's sustained and persistent identity creation, there's safety and security. The biggest problem with all those things, and I recommend the primer by Matthew Ball about the metaverse, looking at that. The big challenge with all those things is there's not a good place, since it's all new, to say, here's how you do it. So we've started Metaversal U, and we kind of picked the gaming as the first part of that. So we just are launching our coming out of alpha on our workshop.games. And that is just to bring people in to say, here's what I've done, to talk about what they did, because you could go see all these pieces all over, but there's not really a good place yet that's putting that. So we figure if we can just get workshops from people that are actually doing it, that would probably be the best thing to start. And then we can move up them curriculums and all that kind of thing. So workshop.games is focusing mostly on the gaming
aspect. About what you're talking about. Where's that workshop?
Workshop.games.
Wow, cool.
So we just have big connections with people who've done these things, built these worlds, built DAOs and DACs and blockchains. And so, our deal is, how do you get people to do that? The other thing is, I think there is going to be a big career in terms of just the governance and how to governance and protect that and write the smart contracts in part of that. And so gofractally.com is trying to get a handle on how do you do this collaborative democratic type government within metaversal things. So, gofractally.com is that, and workshop.games, and try a thing there. And the other thing is just to think about what businesses are doing today that they get. So you say, what should they do today? The three things that businesses are doing today is, first of all, authentication. You can authenticate warranties. UC San Diego is just announced they're going to put all their degrees on a blockchain. So how do you use this public ledger to record warranties or ownership? Or people are doing it now with the watches, the limited edition watches and things like that. So identity or authentication is already a big thing that businesses can start in. The other one is access. Everything from what we used to buy a movie ticket, and licensing is a big thing. So authentication, access to things, including VIPs, memberships, those things are all starting to become very metaversal and VR. So those are three things right there that businesses can start doing today. Other than that, you can look all over for all. Don't just think in terms of VR. Don't just think in terms of coding, although that's a big part. Think of the whole, everything that it takes to build and run this. We're going to be launching a podcast called Building the Metaverse probably next month to talk about those people that building. So if any of you want to be on that or know about that,
yeah, I was going to say we should connect, because there's a lot of stuff I'm doing that you might be interested too.
Yeah, we're building episodes. We're building episodes right now, and that is sponsored by California Miramar University. So it's a university podcast trying to just start the conversation of what are these things that you might want to get a career in. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. This is really great discussion, especially a lot of interesting things come to this session. Thank you, Dr. Eric, Mr. Mark Lee, and Mr. Jason. Thank you for joining today's session. And I'm sorry, because of my long business trip, I have to start these sessions after 4 hours. I'm sorry about that. But definitely from tomorrow, we will start on time. So thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government, corporation, and agencies. And you know that we are taking a lot of actions in real world. Whatever we are discussing, we are learning, we try to apply it. Sometimes we are successful, sometimes we fail, but we move forward. So thank you for all of your support. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.